Hey everybody, welcome back to Divergent States. Back with Brian, man. How you doing?
Hey, what's up?
How just working. Doing getting stuff ready. I've been like really putting in for the Psychedelic Science 25 coming up.
Yeah, that's right. We've got some cool news about that.
Yeah, we got our press passes and I put in for a grant, so that'll hopefully cover the traveling costs for both of us.
Right.
So that'll be great. So and then yeah, we've been looking into like the after party and stuff. They've got Closey and LS Dream. They're doing the LSC like collab. Like how cool to be able to go there and
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we've totally been doing that.
It's looking
Um,
shaping up to be a pretty good time.
oh yeah, the last time what was it? Psychedelic Science 23. They had it was like Governor Paulus from Colorado. I mean Rick Perry. Melissa Etheridge. They just had a ton of people. So yeah, it'll be great. Yeah, and if you guys want to help support, go to patreon.com, Divergent States. You guys can support us there. Support us, like us on YouTube, follow, subscribe.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, we're going to be
yeah.
doing like a lot of recording there and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, we'll be doing, hopefully, we'll be doing some like remote, like live updates, and we'll be posting a lot of those up onto the Patreon too.
Yeah, so it should be
Yeah.
pretty fun.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, just like the cool interviews we'll be able to get, just like, not even an official interview, just off to the side, half an hour with somebody.
Yeah.
Post those up too. So, yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, so, yeah, tonight we've got Alli Schaper. She is the CEO of Supermush, and she's also the co founder of the Microdosing Collective. So,
Oh, right on.
yeah, I'll be talking to her about, the gray market, the psychedelic mushrooms, the ones you see in gas stations and
Hmm.
stuff, and talking about that and microdosing and some of the microdosing misconceptions and stuff. So,
Takes a lot of balls to try the gas station mushrooms.
right,
It's one thing to
right,
try gas station CBD or fucking like what is it, Delta
Delta
9?
9,
Yeah,
right.
but to go like, nah, dude, let's trip.
Yeah, let's eat these mushrooms that I found in this backcountry gas station somewhere, or gummies or whatever. Yeah.
There's some
So,
interesting stuff about that though too. So
right, right. Yeah, we go through it quite a bit, and good conversation about it. And so we'll take a listen, um, listen to some music here, and we'll be right back to the interview. Awesome. All right. So, Ali, can you share your journey into the world of microdosing and functional mushrooms? What inspired you to found Supermush and co-create the Microdosing Collective?
Yeah. Well, I answer this question differently every time because I think my understanding of my journey with it evolves as my brain evolves. But basically, like the quick version um, is that mushrooms changed my life, and I started to explore the world of functional mushrooms. I started using fully legal superfoods, lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, etc., and saw a really profound change in my physical health and also my understanding of flow state. So I'm really passionate about fungi of all kinds, but I love to focus on functional mushrooms because they were my entry point into the world of you know understanding psychedelics, understanding fungi holistically. So yeah, it started with functional mushrooms, and then I started to have a deeper understanding of the magic of fungi and an understanding of how it operates and how biologically similar we are as humans to fungi, more so than we even are to the animal kingdom. the plant kingdom. Humans are more similar to fungi than we actually are to plants. So there's just so much richness in the wisdom that mushrooms have to offer. And I started to explore my mind with psychedelics over many years and found a deep connection specifically to microdosing, which we can talk about later. And it blossomed into all these different projects, companies. So as it stands now, I started a functional mushroom company called Supermush that's a very fun, psychedelic friendly looking brand. Even though it's fully legal superfoods, we make gummies for energy, passion, and sleep. Those are the main products we have. And then I'm very involved in the psychedelic space. So I'm very involved in psychedelic advocacy through Microdosing Collective, which is our nonprofit. It's the first nonprofit established specifically to focus on the legalization of microdosing and the education around microdosing. And I also host a podcast called Into the Multiverse, mental health podcast, psychedelics podcast, and a lot of other details in there, but that's kind of the general how I got here and why we're talking today.
I that sounds. I mean, it sounds awesome. It's kind of yeah. We kind of all just come to that place. I guess eventually we find that the psychedelics or whatever. However we come to find them and realize the healing potential or how it helps us in some way. And it's great though. I love that you're everything you're doing with it. Kind of on that same thing. How do you find balancing all these entrepreneurial ventures with your advocacy and policy work at the same time?
Yeah, I think they feed each other. I think that the maintenance of my mental health has been very impacted by microdosing. So I've coached a lot of people through their microdosing journey, um, and it has been a massive part of me maintaining my mental health and maintaining. I think one of the downsides of entrepreneurs and the startup culture is that it tends to lead to this burnout where you get to the end of your journey, maybe with a paycheck, maybe not, but usually you're not in flow state when you end that journey. And so the people that I've talked to that have kind of come out the other side of it and feel pretty battered from the path and the kind of hamster wheel that startup life can tend to be, often turn to natural medicines, both functional mushrooms and psychedelics, as a way to kind of heal their mind. And so my approach has kind of been like, how can I heal my mind along the journey? And so yeah, I think all the projects feed each other. I have found investors for Supermush. We have 100 investors through microdosing advocacy things, and also people that want to become more involved with psychedelics through the world of Supermush too. And the big
Congratulations, by the way. That's awesome.
thank you, thank you. It's
Yeah.
it's an amazing group of people. But the core of all of these things is community. I love hosting parties. I love hosting intentional community gatherings. So Supermush is very focused on that. So we're very much a community-led brand, as is Microdosing Collective. So all projects are very synergistic.
Nice. So do you have any like personal experiences of your own that kind of shape your that passion for mushroom microdosing or just mushroom based wellness in general?
Yeah, this isn't going to be a psychedelic answer. Um,
Well, that's fine.
but but yeah, no, I guess the thing that comes to mind is I'm very passionate about the conversation around death. And so I've been writing a lot about that. I've been doing a lot of different speaking things around the concept of building a better relationship with our mortality. And so, as a kind of an interesting tie in between all the things we're talking about, my dad passed away a few years ago, really unexpectedly. And it gave me a deeper connection and understanding of how critical psychedelics as tools for grief are and how important they've been to my family's process, both with, my dad previously using psychedelics before he passed away in recent years before his death, and then my mom's ability to use those same tools for the process of grief because they just take away the harshness and a lot of times the inability to cope with grief in the West. And so that feels like a personal experience that's kind of tied together all of my projects because my parents had never tried a single psychedelic before their 60s, but started to be open to the conversation around them because they started taking lion's mane and started to, interact with Supermush as a brand, and start to understand what I was up to in the world. So yeah, I'm really passionate about that conversation. And I think the core thread of a lot of it is just nervous system regulation. We don't have a lot of tools to manage different traumatic events. We're having this conversation in the middle of Los Angeles being on fire, and 10,000 structures being burned, thousands and thousands of people losing their homes, and the nervous system trauma that's created around that, and the lack of tools that we have as kind of a Western society to support ourselves in dealing with trauma so that it doesn't land in our nervous system and create the symptoms of PTSD. It's very limited. So a little bit of a tangent, but that experience has been very pivotal to my experience of life.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry, and my condolences to your father. I understand. It's so it kind of was that what kind of drew you to that intersection of the wellness, science, and culture and everything, and it's just kind of driven everything there.
No, actually, I was after. It was 2 years ago. So it kind
Oh
of was
wow.
a connecting the dots backwards moment, and I think furthered my passion for getting these tools and education to to families, to people that we're all going to experience death. We're all going to die, even though we don't want to admit it sometimes. And I think that the lack of acceptance around that in the Western world, and the lack of integration and understanding of mortality is often one of the things that creates the most fear in people. When I ask people what their biggest fear is, it's often a fear of death. And that's not the answer you get when you go to India and other cultures that have a really beautiful, harmonious relationship with their mortality. You get, different answers around nirvana and death being the beginning of life. And so I think after that experience, it gave me a deeper understanding of how mushrooms can be tools to regulate the nervous system, both when you're alive and then also to help process the inevitable at the end of life.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think one of the first times I'd ever heard of any psychedelic being used in a therapeutic setting was, in fact, with and I think it was cancer patients, and that acceptance of death, and just the, being able to move on and move away from that fear. But it also kind of reminds me of how in the United States it's almost a singular phenomena that schizophrenia patients have menacing voices, where in other cultures a lot of times they could be friendly or fairy like almost. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I think it has a little bit kind of do with our culture, and where our minds tend to focus on, and that collective, um so yeah. See if the have you faced any significant challenges in being a public advocate for microdosing?
Yeah, I think if we're speaking specifically to the psychedelic advocacy part of things, and maybe I can just give a little color on Microdosing Collective. I started it with Paul Austin, who co-founded Third Wave, which is an amazing resource for psychedelic education. He's taught millions of people how to microdose, and Josh Capel, who is one of the leading psychedelic lawyers. He helped write the policy that decriminalized. Passed the most progressive decrim bill in Colorado, and has written tons and tons of other psychedelic policy across the US. And then we brought in a bunch of other amazing people, John Downs, who's a microdosing coach, guide, and advocate, and have just built this incredible community around the passion for microdosing, which up until like a year ago was still, we hadn't crossed the threshold from science believing that it was anything but anecdotal and placebo effect based on the limited research that goes towards microdosing. All of the clinical trials and all of the research is focused on macrodosing, and the research there is profound, but you have this movement of people that are microdosing or taking a subperceptual amount of psychedelics for all sorts of things, for creativity, for low grade anxiety, depression, healing, um, eating disorders, OCD, getting off their pharmaceutical medication, specifically antidepressants, also ADHD medication. So there's such this wide pool of people that can benefit from this practice that has relatively low risk as far as counter, you know, as far as contraindications with other medications and things like that, there are some kind of caveats and notes to this. And of course, with anything, there are some like risks and things to be addressed. However, by and large, out of the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've worked with microdosing psychedelics, psilocybin specifically, have had profound results. And so what we wanted to do was create actual policy to reflect this. Because if you look at the way that policy is being developed across the United States, we're focused on macrodosing at service centers. And that's incredible because these medicines need to get to people in that way as well. But if you were to really break it down, a friend said this to me, and I really like this analogy. We're legalizing the entire bottle of wine before we legalize a sip of wine. And there's not a whole lot of sense that really, can be, made of that because microdosing can be so beneficial. And so our goal is to help close the gap between culture and government. There was a study done in 2023 that audited how many people in the United States were using psychedelics. And they found around 8 million people were using these medicines, which is a pretty astounding number.
That's a pretty good number.
It's a pretty great number. But what was even more incredible is that 4 million of those people were microdosing. So half of the total number of people that were engaging in psychedelics of any sort were using microdosing as a tool for their mental health. And so our goal is to help close the gap between culture and government and make sure these policies are included in future bills, regulatory policy that are being passed. So we're working on a few different things. We've already made micro adjustments to existing policies in states like Colorado and Oregon, but working to create something that actually reflects the way that culture is using microdosing and also the way that they can stand to benefit from the most.
Nice. How does functional mushrooms like from Supermush complement or different from the psychedelic microdosing?
Yeah. So have you taken lion's mane? Are you familiar with functional mushrooms?
I am familiar. In fact, I've been my father-in-law. He recently was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So I've been looking into trying to find some lion's mane for him, just to help as a supplement. I think it's a great idea for him. Just been looking into it. So yeah, that's I think it's been shown. I think it's been proven to promote nootropics, neurogenesis, I guess, in the brain. So it's and yeah, the fungi, uh, just it's all part of our world and kind of, it interconnects everything through the mycelium, and that's, that's part of what I love about, any of the mushrooms and everything, whether it's psilocybin or not. But yeah, so yeah, I am familiar. Sorry, a little rant there.
Yeah, no, you pointed out some beautiful points that I can kind of dive into. So functional mushrooms it's a funny name, right? Because technically all mushrooms are functional, and functional just denotes the fact that it has a benefit beyond just being nutritional. And so there's around 13 main functional mushrooms, if you will. These are fully legal superfood fungi that you can find in your grocery store. And the main ones people might have heard about are lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, chaga, maitake, turkey tail, etc. And each of these superfood mushrooms has kind of catch-all benefits. So they all are incredible for, lowering inflammation in your body, amazing for gut health, energy levels, supporting and reducing stress. And then there's ones that have specific superfood benefits in one area. So lion's mane is the brain mushroom. It's this beautiful kind of like hairy looking, it looks like the mane of a lion. It's white and beautiful. And when you extract these functional mushrooms, which have been used, by the way, for thousands and thousands of years. I actually grew up over in Taipei in Taiwan. And so functional mushrooms were just a part of my culture. They weren't focused on in the way that we're focusing on them in the West as these are mushrooms. They're just ingredients that you find very, very commonly. But yeah, well, I think it would be helpful for people to know, because I'm assuming a lot of this audience is interested in using psychedelics, or maybe is interested in ways that you can optimize that experience. And I love to talk about, you can use functional mushrooms by themselves, which I believe, humans should be doing every single day. We evolved eating them. So for 20,000 years of human evolution, they were such a critical part of our every single day diet. And we have very much taken them out of our diet in the West. They're still a huge part of, Eastern cultures, normal diet. But reintroducing functional mushrooms is incredible. And then if you're looking to supplement them and use them in higher doses for the superpowers of lion's mane and chaga and these, incredible healing benefits, you can also stack them with psilocybin. So if you look at any mainstream consumer product in the psychedelic space, which are all still currently illegal, not available for consumer use, yet are widespread across the U.S. A lot of these brands are going against the law currently to get people the quality supplements like microdosing. There's a ton of brands out there that are not doing it in the right way, and then there are some that are. So our goal again with Microdosing Collective is how to legalize and create safe access for people to have access to these products. But specifically on like the brain chemistry interaction, if you're taking psilocybin and you're combining it with things like lion's mane and ashwagandha and cordyceps and vitamin D and shilajit and all of these amazing superfoods, it is very synergistic with your brain chemistry. And Paul Stamets is huge on this. He created the Stamets stack, which combines psilocybin, lion's mane, and niacin. And so when people are taking microdosing, you're also feeling the lion's mane a lot of the times, because if you're taking the correct dose of a microdose, it's below the hallucinogenic level, so it's subhallucinogenic. So that's just a little bit about how to combine them. But if you take a functional mushrooms every single day, you will notice a difference in your health for sure. Cordyceps is another one that I love to talk about. It's a fungi. It kind of looks like Cheetos. It's like these little curly fungi, and it increases the amount of ATP to your muscles. So it actually increases the amount of oxygen that your muscles are able to take in and use. Athletes love cordyceps. For a while, around 60 years ago in the Olympics, people thought that Chinese athletes were using steroids because cordyceps was so profoundly improving their performance and their ability to, maintain optimal endurance. So the list kind of goes on and on. I could go into each functional mushroom. If you want me to do one more, I can. But there's so many beautiful healing benefits to them.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. I was thinking myself as festivals or concerts, it'd be great if you need the extra oxygen to stand a little longer, dance a little longer. You always have,
Mm-hmm.
always a little extra. So, but yeah, if you want to go into any more, that's great.
Yeah, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about Supermush because the reason we created the brand was to get functional mushrooms to people in a way that was accessible and tasted good. Mushrooms taste like mushrooms. They taste very bitter often, some more than others, but they have a really potent flavor, very earth-like flavor. And so we wanted to create products that took the extracts of these mushrooms. You want to take, the extracts is what you want to be looking for. Fruiting body extracts is what we use in our products. And we turn them into first mouth sprays, so functional mushroom mouth sprays. And then we made mints for creativity and flow state, different stacks for each of those things. And then we made gummies for energy, sex, and sleep. And so we have sugar-free gummies. They're stacked with other functional superfoods as well, and they're delicious. So you get this high dose of functional mushrooms, but you're not taking a ton of caffeine into your system. So if you want to take it for a social event, the energy and sex ones are great because they're uplifting, they boost your mood, they increase blood flow, and they're not going to give you a crazy crash like caffeine does. And then, the sleep ones, for example, we wanted to make sure we weren't using melatonin, which if you take over a period of time, your body loses its ability to naturally produce it. So if you take melatonin, it's not something you should be taking over an extended period of time. And so we made something that was just made with magnesium and ashwagandha and chaga and reishi and these compounds that will wind down your system at night, help prepare it for rest and help your body stay asleep so that you wake up the next morning feeling energized. Because most of the problems that people experience with energy levels and kind of this wild up and down cycle that we tend to go with, we tend to perceive as normal is based on the fact that our bodies aren't sleeping well. We're consuming things that are making us stay awake at night, alcohol, caffeine, disrupting our sleep cycles, and then having to overcompensate for that in the morning so that we can get this boost of energy to be awake during our day. So it's something that just kind of feeds into a spiral.
Oh, nice. So are there any myths about microdosing you'd like to debunk?
Myths about microdosing. Let's see. Well, I mean, the one that comes to mind is most people, when they say they're microdosing, they're not actually microdosing. So, the technical
Right.
definition of a microdose is, you can microdose technically anything, but we'll talk about psilocybin for the sake of this conversation. The definition of that falls, that the amount of the substance that you're taking, of the active substance, is between zero point 0.1 and zero point 0.2 of a gram of mushrooms. And so sometimes I'll talk to people that they say, oh, I took 0.6 or half a gram of mushrooms and I took a microdose. And that's fine. That's more what you would call a social dose. There's different terminologies for it, based on where you kind of fit into different subsets of culture. But the definition of a microdose is subhallucinogenic. And James Fadiman, who is commonly referred to as the godfather of microdosing, is the one who popularized this concept. So kind of the history and the story of it goes is in 1938, Albert Hofmann synthesized LSD, but considered microdosing one of the drug's most, like potentially magnanimous uses, but wasn't really, really studied effectively and popularized until James Fadiman, who was one of his proteges, was popularized the concept. And so he, in the early 2000s, he wrote the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, and then he went on the Tim Ferriss podcast, I believe it was in 2011, and started to talk about this concept of microdosing. And then you had this widespread, kind of viral movement across Silicon Valley, entrepreneurs and people that were using microdosing for creativity and flow state, and accredited a lot of different inventions to psilocybin, to LSD, things like this. And so now what we have in our current culture is you have 4 million people across the US, reported at least, that are utilizing microdosing for maintaining their mental health, for some similar things to what the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs popularized it as. But there's this whole movement of moms who are microdosing. There is athletes that are using it for improving their athletic performance, their ability to feel different muscle groups in their body in a more specific way. If you talk to pro athletes or pro weightlifters, I was talking to some friends of mine, and 95% of the world isn't going to notice these micro differences. But if you're really like, that is your world and you're training every single day, you notice when your muscles are able to do different things. You're able to put different focus there. So, especially for pro sports athletes, they notice a pretty profound difference with microdosing.
Nice. Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially, like you were talking earlier with, these mushrooms are in these other diets, but not really in our own. And you know, so your work with the Microdosing Collective, what inspired the creation of the Microdosing Collective, and what would you say are its primary goals?
Well, what inspired it was that microdosing was profound in my life. Hundreds of people I know had found incredible benefit from using this protocol. Really taking subperceptual psychedelics as a supplement, or subhallucinogenic is technically the better term. And as I was reading policy, I realized that there was no focus on it. So there was no real community to represent people who microdosed. And we wanted to make sure that there was a legal safe pathway and that it wasn't left out of the policy conversation, because it can be so impactful if it's implemented correctly. And the fear is that all of the focus goes on macrodosing at service centers, but that leaves a huge gap in the way that culture is actually using these substances. And it forces people to go to the underground market, use substances that aren't vetted, tested, safe, usually from a guy who knows a guy on Signal or encrypted messaging apps. So we wanted a way to bring this to above ground markets in a way that was safe, accessible, and limited it from being completely owned by the pharmaceutical industry. And that was kind of the inspiration behind it. And its goals, very simply, are to help legalize microdosing in the United States. We would love that to happen primarily, or I guess not primarily, but to start in California, because of what California represents as a cultural vehicle for the rest of the country. And our hope is to include policy that would allow for some sort of a take-home protocol with some guardrails in it, with education and research supporting and helping to educate people before they're engaging in something like this, but to create some policy that would allow for that. or some pilot programs, and then to roll it out to other states and see where we can improve there.
Oh, nice. So, what are the biggest policy challenges facing the microdosing advocacy so far?
That most of the people writing policy about what we're allowed to put in our body don't know what those substances are.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Just getting the message out there that what they do, what they can do. Right. Um, how does the Microdosing Collective work to influence policymakers and educate the public of these things?
So we have we've done a few things that have been really notable. One is, we have a policy committee within our organization. So I mentioned Josh Capel, who's our co-founder and policy director, and then we also have a whole group of lawyers that we work with and we touch base with to kind of get an effective audit of what's going on across the country with different policies in different states, because this will be a state by state policy. Right now, it doesn't look like in the next few years there's going to be a federal legalization potential for microdosing psychedelics. And so, that being said, we have a policy committee that meets, audits what's happening, and we've also gone directly to the governments. We took a whole group of our team, around 20 people, to Sacramento and met with Governor Newsom's office, Scott Wiener, who's a big proponent for psychedelics. Unfortunately, there were 4 bills over the last few years in California that were proposed and then vetoed for a variety of reasons that we don't need to necessarily get into. But we have been educating policymakers, lobbyists on microdosing and why it's important. So our next step with it is to, figure out what is going to be proposed, how we can potentially include our policy, our language, our community in those bills, and also just number one, like first and foremost, is creating more education and more culture and more community around this movement, because the larger group of people that you represent, the more impactful you'll be able to be in policy. And we're also really focused on research as well. We're running a study for cluster headaches, showing how microdosing can be impactful in the reduction of cluster headaches. And then we're also attaching ourselves to other studies and initiatives that are undergoing to create more research, legitimate research around the practice of microdosing.
Nice, kind of going along those same lines. Are there any countries or regions that seem to be kind of leading the way with microdosing legislation regulations?
Obviously there's some countries where the legalization of mushrooms is available. Like, if you go to Amsterdam, you can buy mushrooms. And there's different countries across the world where that is possible. I would say Canada's ahead of us as far as, policy and research as well. But there's some really cool studies that have come out, like from the Imperial College of London. There's a study on LSD that showed LSD can improve sleep scores, improve REM sleep for participants that are going on a microdosing protocols. That was a notable one with microdosing. There's a bunch of studies that are underway, really incredible organizations that are focusing on this as an initiative, because there hasn't been much attention on psychedelics for creativity and showing how we can support the human mind in other ways that aren't just like mental health specific issues. And I think the more momentum that we see in that space, the better. So, I mean, I guess to round out your question around like where's the United States in comparison to other countries, like I think the next year will be really telling to see. We have a huge change in, we have a huge change in legislation that's going to follow what's happening with the new administration coming in, and around 7 days the inauguration is from now, and I am excited about RFK for what it's worth. And his belief in the power of psychedelics will be, I think, very influential to our ability to make policy changes, hopefully.
Yeah, that is exciting. That coming up. Yeah. Well, at least we know there's somewhat of a an advocate in there for that. The Health and Human Services. What role do you see for just the normal everyday psychonaut in helping advance this policy reform?
Come be a member of the Microdosing Collective would be thing number one. the more attention and the more cultural momentum that comes to this space, the better, because the more headlines, the more news, all of it from there's so many different layers of how to push this movement forward, and they all kind of coalesce in momentum. So the more momentum, the better, because it forces it to be a focal point for politicians. And we have, very simple. You can sign up on our website, donate $25 a month to be a member of our community, get invited to events that we do. We're going to be doing a few big events at Psychedelic Science. I would say supporting the mushroom movement in general, supporting the functional mushroom brands, supporting, anything that has to do with fungi will create cultural momentum around pushing this movement forward. And so there's so many different really fascinating communities that are coalescing around psychedelics. Microdosing Collective is one of them. Supermush is one of them. Um, so I'd say, yeah, those are a few obvious ways to kind of get involved and stay, in the loop with what's happening with policy. And anytime there's an opportunity to sign a petition or call your local government to call in about an issue, like actually do that, because it makes a difference. And we have, we point to resources and tell people when and how they should do those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. Always, you have the supposed to, have the politicians for a reason. Give them a call, and all this kind of, it all kind of leads up to, I guess, the microdosing kind of gray market that exists out there, kind of due to any kind of legal pathways for them so far. I think it kind of presents opportunities and risks of that. What would how would you explain the psychedelic gray market, and how does it operate within today's legal landscape?
I mean, what's so funny about this is I'm in Moab, Utah right now, and my boyfriend was at a convenience store and he came back and was like, "Oh my God, they were selling mushrooms just at this convenience store." And you see that all across, I live in Venice Beach. There's like full mushroom shops operating in Venice Beach. There's several in Canada. Like there's a lot of stores that are just like fully um, selling underground products. We estimate there's around like 1,000 brands across the US that are selling and operating, some online, some, a little bit more hush hush and door to door. But the point is with these brands, like some of them have incredible high quality product and they're taking the risk, the very, illegal risk currently, except for in certain states where it's decriminalized to grow and consume and share your own, Colorado being one of those states, but they're taking the risk to get this product to people. And then there's brands that are capitalizing off the fact that it's unregulated, unsafe, and creating really terrible product. Polka Dot has had some health concerns. Diamond Shrooms is the brand that he saw at the store. There's this whole PR scandal because people that have been consuming these products, which you can now buy at some, not legally, but you can buy them at some of these stores, and they're making people sick and they're getting hospitalized because they're not what they say they are inside of the product. And that's what happens when you don't regulate supplements.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, in fact, I'd heard that even the polka dot bars, people just downloading the wrapper and printing the wrapper straight out. So it could be anything now, and you don't know if it really is a polka dot or anything. Um, so, I mean, I know that's part of what you guys are doing. So, what kind of steps are you guys looking at to maybe try to help kind of maybe move policy in the way of sourcing safe and ethical products?
Yeah, so there's a few things. There's like a few bills that we're tracking that have been introduced that might be ones that we would either support or, you know, adopt the language and take into other states. Like right now, the two kind of micro changes that we've made is reducing the amount of time that you have to sit with a facilitator while you take a microdose. Because right now, how it's legal to take a microdose and pay for it, at least in Colorado and Oregon, is to go into a service center and sit with a facilitator and pay a few $100s, which is obviously not reflective of the way that microdosing, works, to sit there and look at someone that's ideally, using it while you're in your life and getting that subtle neuroplasticity while you're in your day-to-day life. But either way, we're
Right.
making micro adjustments to reducing the time that you're allowed, or that you have to sit with a facilitator. So making changes to existing policy and then looking at bills that were introduced. There was this great bill introduced in New York that proposed by this woman, Allison Hoots, is an amazing lawyer, and it reflected more of a driver's license model, so like a driver's license test model, where there's some preliminary education that's required to, you know, successfully be able to take home any sort of microdosing supplement or, you know, psychedelic supplement, which is something really interesting. I haven't been tracking exactly what's happened with the progression of that, but we are looking at like what would be the best policy. The interesting thing about having this community and this nonprofit that's kind of a movement by the people, if you will, is we get to see like what do people want, and we're not making a policy that doesn't actually reflect, you know, how people want to use these substances. So we're kind of crowdsourcing a lot of different information, research, and then turning that into potential policy. Also noting that the things that we propose may or may not get rejected. So we have to make certain sacrifices to make more guardrails in the hopes that we will get something accepted and then prove its safety and then reduce those guardrails to allow people to have more freedom with safe, efficacious products.
Oh, yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, that. I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of what you have to do. Just and it'll. I hopefully as things get more regulated, we will get more of that. Kind of a more quality, I guess, or say more of a consistent. Do you think the regulated market could maintain like a kind of community driven ethos of the gray market?
So is the question, do you think that the policy, like the legalization, would maintain like community ethics?
Yeah, I think like right now we see in a lot of spaces, like you're saying, there's some really good high quality products and people who really pay attention to what they're putting out. But then you also have the you know the I guess the more gray or less ethical market or vendors out there, and but I think that's part of like that like part of the good part of the community is a lot of times those are pointed out pretty quickly. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
kind of reminds saw a paper somebody had noticed today that one of the other mods from another subreddit, he was saying that they did a paper finding where people got some of their most accurate information about drug research online, and one of them was Reddit, which is community driven. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, that's actually really that's kind of that's impressive, and I think that goes to show the value of just the community in that. So yeah, I think that's kind of the question. Do you think there's any way that a regulated market that's centered around more of the capital and the drive, could it maintain still kind of that community driven ethos of kind of watching out for each other?
Yeah, I actually just looked it up while we're talking. There's a 300,000 around uh, community online for microdosing, you know, subreddit, which is really cool. And
Yeah,
my
that's
answer is
awesome.
like I hope so. And the reality is I don't know. And I think the priority is how do we get people legal, safe access to this in a way that's reasonable and timely, and so there's a lot of different considerations in that. And our lawyer Josh would be an amazing person to have on this podcast, just to talk about the details of that and how it's rolled out. We did a whole microdosing policy education dinner just to like lay out the framework of how this, you know, how this could possibly make its way through the system and then create, you know, the future of legal policy, because there's different avenues. And my hope is that it will be community driven, and that's the reason why we started this community. Our number one goal right now, which we've shifted a lot of different directions and initiatives based on the viability of and timing of policy, where our number one goal right now is to grow the community as large as we can, involve ourselves with as many relevant cultural projects. There's an amazing documentary coming out about microdosing, kind of like a fantastic fungi type of documentary, but specifically on microdosing, that we're going to support as a nonprofit partner as well. And then in the meantime, you know, my focus and my day job, you know, obviously we're talking a lot about Microdosing Collective, is like my day job is Supermush and creating a cultural brand that's fun and colorful and joyous and kind of destigmatizes psychedelics just by the nature of the artwork and the brand, and brings together a community to educate around mushrooms holistically and fungi holistically, and focuses on stories and storytelling. You know, with our podcast, we have people come on and share their stories with functional mushrooms and psychedelics and mental health and creativity and art. And those stories start to slowly dismantle the public opinion and the stigma that we've kind of attached to, all mushrooms of all kinds, specifically psychedelics are the ones that are the most heated. But it's really, my summary is storytelling, really amazing community education, and then taking all of that momentum to, to push forward for policy change.
Nice. So, what excites you the most about the this growing interest in psychedelics and mushrooms coming around now?
I think what excites me the most. What excites me the most is talking to people who, at one point in their journey, were very clear that psychedelics were bad for you, or functional mushrooms were, bad for you, or thought functional mushrooms were psychedelic. There's still a, large part of the population that believes that lion's mane gets you high, and it does, just, in a legal, great way. But I love talking to people that have changed their own mind, because the very nature of these substances are that they help you change and open your mind and regrow new brain cells and change the way that you think and process the world, change the way that your nervous system operates. And they're tools. They're just a reference point. The brain of a child is very similar to the brain state of someone who's ingested psilocybin mushrooms. That if you look at the brain scans, they're very similar. Likewise, someone who's in transcendental meditation. So I'm really excited that people are starting to understand the science behind these substances, and also learning the history of them. These are, mushrooms have been used for thousands of years, both functional and psychedelic. They're actually the only medicine that has stood the test of time in so many ways. And so I'm excited that people are starting to learn the history and the reality of how vital and how useful these can be for our society.
Yeah, I was just thinking back. What was it, the 1950s with Maria Sabor? I think it was that they really the mushrooms really started
Maria
catching.
Sabina, yeah.
Yeah, Maria Sabina. That's it, and started catching back on again, and it's almost kind of that same. I guess the same kind of renaissance of the sense with microdosing today. So, um, yeah, are there any community-driven initiatives or collaborations that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I mean, with Supermush, we've done so many cool things. We've done collaborations with artists like Sophie Tucker and Blondish. We've done collaborations with brands like Sun Life and Air One, and we are starting to launch further collaborations with different artists and athletes that are big advocates for mental health, with actual, gummy product collaborations. And we also got into some really big retailers, which I'm very excited about. So those will be launching in a few months. And I'm not allowed to say which ones just yet, but very excited about that. And for Microdosing Collective, we are going to be activating at the MAPS conference in June. So we'll be doing an event to honor James Fadiman, who's, really put microdosing on the map for so many people, to honor his life, like legacy, the launch of his book. And then we'll also be doing a big party for Microdosing Collective. So if you're listening to this and you're coming to the MAPS conference, come hang out with us.
Well, that'll be awesome. We're trying to get there ourselves, so that'll be a ton of fun to meet everybody. That we've been talking to quite a few people, so yeah, to meet everybody in person would be great. So, where'd you say Supermush? Where can listeners learn about the work? Donate to the Microdosing Collective or support Supermush?
Yeah, so Supermush, supermush.com, or I am Supermush on TikTok, Supermush on Instagram, and then Microdosing Collective, spelled how it sounds. You can go to microdosingcollective.org or connect with us on Instagram, and then check out our podcast. It's called Into the Multiverse, and you can find it on all listening platforms. And then if you want to chat with me, my Instagram's Alli Schaper, which I'm sure you will link up somewhere in the show
Right.
notes here. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I guess final question: if there's one key takeaway or message you'd like to leave with listeners about microdosing and its future, what would it be?
I would say the key message is more so that the substances that we consume can define a lot of our life. And so to be really intentional and conscious and educated about everything you consume is one of the biggest levers that you can pull to maximize your vitality.
Anyway, yeah, it was great having you here. Hopefully we'll have you back. And yeah, I'd love to talk to you. You know, you said you're an attorney there at the Microdosing Collective. Yeah. Love to have you and have you back anytime. So
Amazing. Yeah, you should definitely get Paul Austin on from Third Wave.
yeah.
Josh would be great. And I'll recommend some more people for you. But it was so great to chat with you. And I hope everyone enjoyed the episode, and reach out to me if you have any cool ideas or collaborations. I'm always interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, dude, that was great. I feel like I learned quite a bit about mushrooms that I didn't know before.
Yeah, she's really knowledgeable just about just so much. So it was a
Oh,
lot of fun talking to her.
absolutely. And there's a lot of ambition and drive there, especially with like working with more laws and just trying to shape the industry as a whole.
Right. Yeah, she's really got her toe in, and just I see her on social media all the time, just constantly posting stuff. Yeah, she's really involved with it. It was a really fun interview too. Yeah. So I did find out between the time, because we had some time recording from the intro to here, we didn't get the grant. So for the travel. So if you guys out there want to support us, you can hit us up with buy me a coffee. Don't think anybody's done that yet. Hit us up on patreon.com, Divergent States, or even the divergentstates.buzzsprout.com. You can become a
Mm-hmm.
subscriber there. So
Right.
support the show and help us get to Psychedelic Science 2025. But yeah, you guys got music or something? Hit us up out there. Send your submissions in. Um, but yeah, we're getting stoked for that. Psychedelic Science 2025 should be a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a great time. I mean, it's going to be a lot of cool people there. It's going to be a great experience.
Yeah, yeah, I, I'm kind of blown away by it all still, but it's just so much fun. And they're gonna have, just being able to talk to all the people and be able to just bring all those conversations to everybody. And yeah, I mean, that's the goal. Get it out there. Yeah, we're picking up on YouTube, Spotify.
That's
I
right.
mean, it's up and coming. We're getting the streams, getting the downloads. You guys share it out there with your friends. You know, support us on the Patreon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Leave us a review anywhere that you're listening to. That always
that's a
helps.
good. Yeah, that's a good point. Also, we've got in the video or the descriptions for the podcast. You can send us a text if you want. You just want to send a text to say what's up or say hi, or you got a story or something you might a tip you'd like to tell. Just send us a text.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, we're getting ready. I think later this month we might do a psychedelics 101 kind of. Brian and I'll just be chatting. Maybe we'll find somebody to come in. Maybe do like a round table or something. Be
Mm.
some fun. Be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, but all right, guys. Yeah, have fun. Keep exploring.
Catch you next time.